The holiday weekend is over and May is mercifully winding down. We're leaping back into a new week on a Talking Tuesday of the Podcast Daily. Welcome back. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Let's say hypothetically, Bill, that Ryan Day's media tour included, a conversation with the three of us. What kind of summer chat would we be having? What would be the first thing on your mind?
Oh, man. The first thing on my mind would be the 5 quarterbacks and how you proceed forward with that. Not that it's like automatically a bad thing, but like Doug and I did a Kings of Columbus where we focused solely sort of on questions we had received from subtext or via subtext about the quarterbacks. And there were a few like, how is this going to work kind of questions, which I think is fair, right? It's not even necessarily about like getting the starter ready, because I think that's pretty straightforward. It's how you work beyond that, right? Because I know Ryan Day has always said that he wants 4 scholarship quarterbacks. Sometimes he's had that, sometimes he hasn't. Now he has 5, and it really seems like a bear to handle. And I think they can find a way to handle it, but in a world where you have to sort of tread lightly with quarterbacks and promises made and promises kept and all that stuff, like I could see it being somewhat difficult for them to figure out a way to keep everybody engaged, I guess, in fall camp once that rolls around. So now that he knows that they have all 5 guys sticking around for this season, I'm very curious now what the plans are to make sure that goes smoothly in August.
I wonder if it even is like as straightforward as normal for a starter. I'd be interested to hear that, because if we are working under the assumption that Will Howard is going to be the starter, and that in this world where we're talking about multiple players at every position playing to get through 16 games, I wonder if that also plays into the decision-making process for Chip Kelly and Ryan Day with Devin Brown's reps or Lincoln Kienholz, Julian St. Aaron. I mean, it could be anybody beyond that, but like, does the number 2 need more work? Is the battle a lot? I mean, we don't know that it's definitively over. Probably is not definitively over for those guys. So like, do you take it all the way through August the way that you did last year? It didn't seem like that was his preference, nor did it maybe work to the optimal outcome with Kyle McCord and Devin Brown. So, I'm sure that like we would never get a full breakdown of exactly how many reps, although Chip Kelly seemed pretty open about his plans, and they followed through with basically what he described in terms of rotation in March and April. So it's definitely the most interesting thing about Ohio State.
Without question. I mean, it's the quarterback position. It's five players. It's looking for a starting quarterback. It's a transfer coming in. It's a guy who the team obviously loves in Devin Brown, but has had his injury issues that kept him off the field, that he took away his best opportunity to prove that he could actually be the guy for Ohio State. Like there are a lot of intriguing storylines around the quarterback. And obviously with Ryan Day specifically, that's his bread and butter. And so I think it's the area anyone would want to ask him the first questions. I want to know.
Sorry for being so obvious, Berm.
You have to. Sometimes low-hanging fruit is the best tasting fruit, because it requires least amount of work to get it.
I'm not sure that that's what that means.
No, that's exactly what it means. Don't look it up. I want to know how close Ryan Day is to a discussion with Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson, where he says we need to do more things defensively this year, like more. We need to be more multiple. We need to prepare for the future, because if you look at this current roster, yes, this season, I think that you are heading into a 2024 season where the very standard 4-3 that Ohio State has been famous for is what they do. And that's fine when you have Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau. But those guys are not going to be there after this year. And quite frankly, you don't have any true defensive ends on the roster behind them. I mean, you have one really in Kenyatta Jackson, and who knows exactly how his career pans out between now and next, this time next year. So I think that the defense is getting ready to be in a position from a roster standpoint where you need to do different things, and not only just from a roster standpoint, but from a college football standpoint, the world is catching up. Like something has to give, and I'm curious as to how much input or how much influence Ryan Day is having in those discussions, or if he's completely, still leaving it up to Jim Knowles and Larry Johnson to figure out for themselves.
How much of that, Berm, like you never make drastic changes like that to like win one recruitment. But I am fascinated by the Justin Hill recruitment and the fact that they are recruiting him for a position that they do not and have not used. Like they have to, right? Or else they're going to lose that kid probably to Oregon or somewhere else.
Yeah, Oregon or Alabama. I mean, Justin Hill is, for the uninitiated, high 4-star defensive end linebacker type from Winton Woods High School. I honestly think that if Justin Hill was more defined as a defensive end, or the reason like Tavian St. Clair and Carter Lowe and these other guys are ranked ahead of him in Ohio is because of their positional value. I mean, the quarterback, the offensive tackle, etc. If Justin Hill was defined as a defensive end at 6'4" and 220 pounds or so, which is where he is right now, I think his value would be higher. I think he's the best football player, high school football player in the Midwest. And I think you have to win that battle. You cannot lose Justin Hill to Oregon or to Alabama. And the whole effort from those teams is saying, Ohio State doesn't play this guy in their defense, so why should you go there? They sent Larry Johnson, James Laurinaitis, Jim Knowles, and Tim Walton to see Justin Hill last week. It was the first time Larry Johnson's really been involved in this recruitment, and it was designed very specifically to say, this is how we're going to deploy you as a pass rusher, and this is how you can be both things. But Ohio State does absolutely have to put that position on tape and give, like, he might end up committing to Ohio State on July 3rd when he makes his decision. But in doing so, it is entirely like a trust fall. And if we get into October and November and Ohio State's still not putting that position on the field or on tape, then it becomes much easier for Oregon, who's obviously already coming at this from a different perspective as far as like just pure over the top NIL aggression, or Alabama to say, look, they told you that they were going to do it and they're still not doing it. And they're never going to do it. So yeah, I mean, that is a part of why I think it's important. Like, you have to set up the future.
It's so hard to understand why we haven't seen it at all. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, in the pecking order, you preface this by saying, well, is Ryan Day going to dictate some terms to Jim Knowles? And that's the question we've had over the last 2 years. Like, if Larry Johnson is standing in the way of something that Jim Knowles has done throughout his career, like, yes, Larry Johnson is one of the best defensive line coaches to ever do it in college football, but Jim Knowles has got a pretty deep resume as a defensive coordinator and was hired and paid $2 million a year to put his scheme into play at Ohio State. Like, that just seems like a foolish thing to stand in the way of progress, of installation. And now we're talking about not just the current iteration of the roster, but also potentially the future makeup of it. It doesn't compute in my brain, Bill.
No, it doesn't for me either. I would almost understand if they didn't really do it at all in year one as like a transitional thing. It's like, okay, we're going to shelve this while we learn the rest of the defense and then start ramping it up in year two. But it was the opposite. They did it a little bit in year one and then didn't do it at all in year two. And then here we are having this conversation again with a couple of guys, I think, on the roster who clearly fit the mold of what they're looking for. So I guess we'll see. I remain somewhat optimistic that they will do it. Partly just because I think it's sort of the natural sort of evolution of this defense as it goes into year three with so many guys back. But it has been odd this entire time that Jim Knowles has just like not done a thing that seemed rather fundamental to his defense at Oklahoma State.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much of an answer we would get on that in May. Don't know about this one either, but I'm fascinated by this. We brought this up around signing day and the transfer portal with Lane Kiffin being like, oh, Ohio State's paying $130 million. I'd like to have a more lengthy conversation that's not just in the press conference about like this notion that Ohio State has bought the best roster in college football, which apparently they did, and it only took 6 players to do it, which, hey, that means pretty good job to you, Ohio State. You're already in good shape. But it's the narrative around the team is so bizarre nationally, in my opinion. In Columbus, a lot of the things we talk about are the 3-game losing streak to Michigan, not winning the Big Ten, potentially being a championship or a bust season for Ryan Day. And like everywhere else, like, oh, Ohio State's frustrated and they're just splashing the pot to buy up every player in college football. And I don't like, probably neither of those things are correct. And I wonder like how much more strange that's made CEO Ryan Day's job to hear all of the coverage around himself and his team. Like also the transfer portal, specifically the way they've managed it, like love to get into that more. And the feedback that they've received on that and the way they've built the roster. But like everything else tied up around this team is like in the weirdest position that I can remember it.
I bet he likes it. I bet Ryan Day's happy to be in the position where teams are envying now what Ohio State is able to do when it comes to financial commitments to its roster. Because like, it's not, we all know, right? It's not just the transfers, right? All those guys who decided not to go to the NFL got paid as well. So I imagine the bill is quite high, but it's not like it's a team full of mercs, right? It's not, they're not Ole Miss. Like, there's a lot of guys who I think individually, like it made sense for them to come back, right? And sure, there's financial incentive to do so, but there's also developmental incentive. I think all of those guys, to a man, probably stand to drastically improve their NFL draft stock by coming back this season, and they're chasing a championship, and it's like the thing that they came here for. So I don't really understand why Ohio State gets kind of talked about in those terms. But if I were Ryan Day, it would make me giddy that the college football world was suddenly afraid, I guess, of the power of Ohio State in this new world, because it's starting to flex its muscle a little bit the way it should.
It's pretty stupid that people expect or think that Ohio State should have. Well, all these guys want to come back. Well, you know what? We're just going to tell them to go to the NFL anyway. We're not even going to try to pay them like that. That's very stupid. But that's why I asked Lathan Ransom about that last week or when he was at Roosters with us, Austin, because like they brought in 6 guys in the transfer portal, and really the Alabama the duo of Caleb Downs and Julian Sayin were just a gift from Alabama. Like they were not intending to transfer. They were not intending to bring those guys in, but you can't turn those 2 down when they decide they want to come to your school. So the fact that they're even lumped into this conversation about Ohio State's off-season aggression, which is absolute BS, because they were not any more aggressive this offseason than they were any other. Michigan still ended up bringing in twice as many transfers as Ohio State. The guys that normally leave didn't. And people are using that as a way to say, look how bad Ohio State is. It's so stupid. It's so stupid. But also we know from a national standpoint, when people talk about Ohio State, it moves the needle and it gets clicks. So I guess I'm surrendering to that.
I wonder if there's just an assumption from the national media. They're like, oh, well, they went out and they got some big ticket items: Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, Will Howard. Well, they must have also added at every other spot on the roster. Like, I wonder if they're just taking it from this simple perspective. Oh, they paid for this. They must have paid for everything, which they didn't actually need and which didn't happen. Like, yeah, adding 6 guys is exactly what Ohio State has done like virtually every year since the transfer portal opened. They didn't decide to just get the big guys and like, oh, well, you know what? Let's take somebody at every position too. Like, why not? We're here. There's some impulse shopping. That did not happen. Like a level of aggression. If you want to lump in the returning NFL guys and count that collective tab as more aggression from Ohio State, I guess fine. But as you said, Bill, everyone had a individual decision to make, and collectively they all made the same one. I don't think it was because Ohio State was like, well, you know what? Your rookie contract would have been $3 million. Let's pay you $6 million to stay for one more year. Like, that's not what happened.
No. And again, like obviously Caleb Downs and Julian saying that those fell into the Ohio State lap, but so did Quinshon Judkins. They were not like, well, you know what? We need to go get Quinshon. It was just like, oh shoot, he's in the portal. Oh crap. He wants to come here. Oh my, he's not even requiring that Travion Henderson leave. Oh, okay, sure. What, are you going to say no to the best running back in college football? Like, what team around the country would have said, you know what? Sorry, we're not interested. This is not for us.
Yeah, that's a good point. I do feel like, because I have probably thrown the word aggressive around to describe Ohio State's roster build this offseason, and that's probably not quite right. Like, I don't know that it was so much like an aggressive posture as they built this roster as it was they were just organized in a way to like kind of answer the call when it came their way, right? Which was not true of them probably last offseason. If all these guys wanted to stay / wanted to come to Ohio State, I don't know that there was enough money in the kitty for Ohio State to do that.
No.
But clearly there is now, like, which is all well and good. Like, it's fair. It's within the state, the rules of play, I guess. So, but no, it's not necessarily overly aggressive or even all that much of a different stance, I think, than Ohio State has taken previously.
No, and the truth is, it is still a sign of slightly different Ryan Day, which we've talked about, like the Julian Saint edition. That was not going to happen. I mean, Ryan Day went back and forth internally about that for days, and I'm sure he probably had some similar conversations or questions about Quinshon Judkins. I'm sure, like, it is a sign that something has changed, but I don't think it's a sign that what people think is the answer to that question.
So that's not a desperation, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Given the timing, I think I would be professionally bound by some code of ethics to ask about the House decision and the incoming revenue sharing with players. I don't really want to. Honestly, maybe I'm wrong. And if I am, text us or let us know. Is there great interest in like the revenue sharing alignment and the salary cap? There probably is more interest than I think there is. I would acknowledge that up front. But it's just like, to me, it's boring. Like talking about NIL deals and talking about contracts and signing caps. I know that that's big business for the NFL and NBA and Major League Baseball. Like, so there probably is more into it, but the actual logistics of it have not been worked out. So I don't really know what any college football coach is supposed to say right now. Like, they don't know if they're going to have 10 million, and they don't know if everyone across 130 schools or eventually 80 schools or less, if they're going to have the same pool of money to work with. So, like, I do think it's significant that college athletics has agreed to pay players, but they haven't figured out exactly how they're going to do that. And so that means that Ryan Day can't know what he's supposed to do either. So he's been a proponent for compensation for players. I already know that. So I don't know if I want to talk about it beyond that.
I think the major thing with that is like whatever shakes out. Like, I think Ohio State, as we discussed previously, will be as well positioned as anyone and better than most to dip into those coffers and pay their football players because they make a whole lot of money compared to the rest of the sport. It would probably be unfair to ask Ryan Day this because he doesn't necessarily need to be the spokesman for such a thing. But I would be curious about his perspective on the ripple effect of that kind of thing, because there is going to be an impact on like Olympic sports and just on like athletic departments are drastically going to change, I think, because of where we're going. And like, he's a guy who played multiple sports. I believe his children play multiple sports. And it's not that like he's the guy that's like set this all in motion. I'm not trying to set him up as that, but just like as someone who seems to value like young athletes diversifying, their kind of skill sets and playing a lot of sports. I wonder what he might think, I guess, of the way that athletics in general is changing. Not so much football, although obviously football probably impacts him more than anything else.
I'm mostly curious about his perspective on whether or not the collectives still need to exist once that is the law of the land, because I think that there is still, initially I didn't know that there was going to even be a place for it, but what you're going to still see is schools going above and beyond whatever the measure or the number that ends up being standardized across the divisions or across the the upper echelons of the sport or whatever. And then you're going to see the other stuff, the extraneous money for the real creme de la creme will still have to come from somewhere else. So I am interested to see if they're going to be able to then bring the collectives in house as well, or how that's going to work, because now he may not have the answers to those questions, or nobody probably does at this point, but I do think that's at least a perspective on it that is important to get.
And with camp season starting in about a week, I assume there's got to be something on your mind for summer recruiting.
Yeah, official visits start the end of this week, so it's really, I'm interested to hear if their philosophy has changed at all. I mean, over the last couple of years, they've aimed towards being the last big weekend for a lot of their kids that they're interested in. It looks to be the case this year again, but this coming weekend is huge. There's a really big group, including the number one receiver in the country, DeCorian Moore, coming in this week. So I do want to know how the fact that kids have unlimited official visits that they can take, how that's impacted maybe the way that they're trying to schedule things, if it matters to them when they get in, or, to have these trips, or, if they're doing anything fundamentally different. But, the class of 2025, which is number 2 class in the country, only has 12 commits right now, and 9 of them are on defense. So it's going to be a very interesting few weeks ahead, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And there's a lot of stuff up in the air, especially in the state of Ohio, with Bo Jackson and Trey McNutt and Justin Hill. Like, there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had. So I am very excited for camp season to get here, because that is the time of the year where we can get a lot of those answers.
Well, maybe we'll get some from Ryan Day with a conversation soon. Maybe today, maybe not. I don't know. We're going to try our best to get one of those scheduled soon. I know that for sure. And then we'll ask some questions and likely get some answers. But for now, we don't have them, and we will wait. But thank you for joining us on the podcast daily.
That's Waiting Wednesday coming up tomorrow.
Wait and see. And you might already know the answer. We will before then, before we record. And who knows? Maybe we'll just dive into those answers on a wacky Wednesday. I don't know, but stay tuned and find out. Again, thanks for joining us. Welcome back from the holiday weekend. Last week of May. Boy, this offseason is just flying by. I can't believe it. It's wonderful. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I'm Austin Ward. We'll see you later.